Howdy, everybody. Just let me know that you can see and hear me okay. Trying yet another setup here. So, yeah, just how I've often said that for whatever reason, these streams, it always seems like at the last second something decides not to work, and that happened again. My interface won't see my computer. So anyway, I'm just using the microphone on my computer, and it usually sounds okay because it's one of the new Macs. They've got better equipment in them, and now I'm just trying to find YouTube again so I can make sure that it looks like I'm broadcasting. So let me just close that one, close that one, close that one. So many windows open. Oh gosh, where's my YouTube? Is that it there? Yeah, that must be it. Okay, your studio looks great. Thank you. And oh, that's lovely. Aaron, you met me in Montreal last month. That's terrific. I'm trying. Yes, I do remember meeting an Aaron. I remember writing your name out on a record, I think. Sounds good. Good. Okay. And I'm glad you like this song so much, Castine. Yeah. So that is the final version of the video. I gave you guys a sneak preview. Yula and I actually recorded that about a year ago. That video, and the most of what you see in the video is the actual performance that's on her new CD. So we recorded that in her living room, the video and the audio at the same time. And then we shot it with 3 cameras, just ourselves. And then one of the cameras was an iPhone. The other 2 cameras were kind of real, proper camcorders. But the iPhone was okay, but it was really hard to color match it. We looked kind of pink in it in the shots from the iPhone. So fortunately, Yula's best buddy Felix is a movie maker. So he actually shot some extra B-roll of her in the same setting with the same clothes on. And when Yula was here last summer, she shot some B-roll of me at my place on PEI with a black background wearing the same outfit. So we edited much better looking footage, close-up footage of the 2 of us, of each of us, into the video. And then, so the video is going to be released for reals, I think, next week. But I just thought you guys would get a kick out of seeing it ahead of time. And Yula's got a gig tonight over in Germany, but she usually watches these streams later on after her gig, so she'll probably watch it later. It'll be a little surprise for her. Okay, so thanks. I'm glad you think the studio looks good. Let's just see if I can do this technical feat here. It requires me going into camo and choosing the other camera, which should be alive. Yes, it is. Okay, so here you should be seeing this now. So this is I'm just using my phone to show you around the studio. So I managed to get a lot done in the last few days. Here, first of all, I'll give you kind of the wide view. I'll run over here. And as you can see, there's still some rubble to clean up. But yeah, this is from the entrance. So basically what it is, it's the larger of the 2 bedrooms in the house. I've turned it into my Dolby Atmos studio. And you'll notice that the one thing missing is the overhead speakers. I have a plan. It just might take all day to do it one day, but I have a plan for mounting them. And you can see I have all my Atmos boxes, the 7 that are on the head plane there, and then my woofer is there. And yeah, all my monitors and everything else is set up. Everything works, except yeah, although the Atmos interface works fine. For whatever reason, my stereo interface, there's supposed to be a little light on there in the middle. And for whatever reason today, when I restarted some stuff, that light refused to go on. And all the connections are fine, and I don't know why it's not working. But anyway, so yeah, the overhead, my scheme is to take this very ugly light fixture down and just take the electrical receptacle that's there for the light fixture and replace it with a 4-way outlet. I know enough about electricity to do all that. And then to mount the speakers, I thought what I would do is find a joist or a stud, whatever's in the ceiling. I guess they're joists. And put a nice decorative piece of wood, like a plank, one plank there, one plank there kind of thing. And then mount the 4 speakers, 2 on each plank. So that way I end up with the overheads, and I just run power to them, and yeah, and then the rest is history. So that should work. And then, yeah, the way that you run the signal to the speakers, like the actual audio signal, is you take Ethernet cables, like you log it into your computer network, and then you take 2 long Ethernet cables. And so what I would do is I'd run them in a track, like one of those plastic tracks, so it's attractive, get it, up the wall and along the ceiling. It just affixes with 2-sided tape, and then they go to these little gizmos that each take 2 channels and then split them into 2 analog channels for the overhead speakers. And that works. That's how it worked at my last place. With no suspended ceiling here, I'm going to have to do that idea. So I've been crafting this for a while. So what I'm going to do is put in a receptacle. I'm going to buy a nice decorative wooden box. I mean, just a box. Not decorative. It's not going to look fancy, but it's going to be a wooden box that'll look nice. Basically flipped upside down with a latch on it. I found one online that will work perfectly. So that I can have access, just by opening the latch, I can have access to the cables and stuff like that in there, but also close it again so it looks nice. So there'll just be a wooden box up there, and then there'll be cables, the XLR cables for the speakers will come out. I'll drill little holes so that the cables can come out and affix to the speakers, and also the power can run to the speakers, because each of the speakers has to have its own power. That's why I have to have a 4 receptacle plug in the ceiling. So that'll be my big handyman special. But yeah, I've almost completely moved in. So my bedroom's pretty much set up. Studio's about 90% there. Yeah, you can see I've got my my Don Ross painting from my second album, the original painting, the Kurt Swinghammer one. Got it on this short little wall. It's a half story up here, so whatever art I hang on those walls has to be quite low. But it works, and I really like this space. The floor is carpeted, so already that absorbs a lot of sound, which is great. So I did the sound treatment. I put all the sound treatment up yesterday. You can see it on the walls behind me, and I've got bass traps in the corner and all that kind of stuff. So now it's perfect in here. It's just like all the liveness is gone. Just a tiny healthy amount, mostly coming off the ceiling. So I may have to do something on the ceiling, maybe deaden it a little bit, but not much. This is mostly a listening room rather than a performance room. So yeah, so nice haircut. Thank you. Last week my hair was so tragic. I hadn't had my haircut since before the tour in Germany, which was it started in the middle of February. So yeah, I mean, I used to wear my hair really long, but I can't do that anymore. It's just not reasonable. So yeah, I find short on the sides and a little bit of poof on the top works. I had a shower just about a half hour ago. I didn't really put any fixative in my hair. Anyway, oh, I forgot to get a guitar. Let's do that. All right. So I thought we'd just have a little fun today and talk a bit about chord voicings and inversions. We've done that before. We've talked about chord voicings and inversions before, but I think it's one of those things that you should come back to on a regular basis, because sometimes it's like going to the gym. If you don't do it often enough and come back and check it out, then your skill level sort of starts to fail. So, oh, it's actually sort of in tune. This is my studio guitar, so this is not the one I take on the road usually. So it was in a case until just a few minutes ago. That's not bad. For those of you who care, it's a Beneteau, of course, like all my acoustic guitars are. And this one is the most recent one he made me. I think he made this during the pandemic, like around 2020. And it's a cedar on the top. and mahogany back and sides. So mahogany is really lightweight, and cedar is very mellow sounding. It's got a lot of warm, round sort of middle range in the tone. So it's a really lovely sounding guitar. It's reminiscent of, for many years I played Loudon guitars, made in Northern Ireland. And the Loudons that I played, they all had cedar top and mahogany back and sides. So this feels very familiar tonally. And the only problem with this guitar is I've had it set up once and it wasn't quite right. I like my guitars to fight back, but this one fights back a little too much. Anyway, great. So what I thought we'd talk about a little bit is chord voicings and inversions. So most of the time when we play, especially, well, it doesn't really matter if you're in standard tuning or if you're in an alter tuning, the vast majority of the time we play root position chords. So what's a root position chord? Well, when you play any of your first position chords, E, A, C, D, G, whatever, A minor, E minor, D minor, F, you're usually aiming for the lowest note that you're playing to be the root of the chord. So remember what the root is? The root is the number one note, right? So each chord corresponds to a scale, if you think about it. So, like for example, a C major chord and a C major scale are related. Okay, a chord is a harmony. A scale is just a series of notes, right? It's like the mode that you're playing in. So if you're in C major, let's say C, D, E, F, G, A, B, that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. That's the scale, or as they say in German, the Tonleiter, which is kind of cool. It's a sound ladder. Scala in Italian, scale, means stairway, so it's like a stairway to heaven. But C, D, E, F, G, A, B, and then we start again the next octave, right? And we can continue that going. So that's one note at a time. So that's where our melodic information comes from. It comes from the scale, right? Our harmonic information also comes from the scale, but usually by grouping the notes together. Hi, Jenny in California. Nice that you're here. So yeah, for example, if you play a C major chord, so we finger it that way on the guitar and we've talked about this a million times, I don't need to go over it, but when you play those particular fingers on those particular strings, you end up, and in combination with the open strings that are left over, you're playing notes numbers 1, 3, and 5 of a C major scale. Hence, the C major scale, those three elements, 1, 3, and 5, combined make the C major chord. So that's the chord that corresponds with the name of the C major scale. Okay, so one is a scale, one is a chord. They're related, but they're not the same, right? I hope everybody gets that idea. So when you play that chord, really what you want is, most of the times, you want C to be the lowest note that you hear as you're playing. You know, so you want to hear this. You're doing a strummy thing. I don't have any nails. I'm just playing with a thumb pick today. While I'm off the road, I'm trying to give my nails a break, but from the artificials. But yeah, that's what you're usually doing, is you're playing the root, the 1, as the lowest note that you're sounding, right? Now, if you're playing certain kinds of music, like especially country music or certain kinds of folk music, you might do this kind of thing. You know, or that's not very good. That kind of thing. What you're doing is you're rocking back and forth between the C and then this low G. So for a split second, what you're doing is you're alternating between what's called root position and what's called the second inversion of the chord. So when you play this, that version of a C chord, like what I call the 6-string C, where you also finger the low E string at the 3rd fret, okay, that gives you the second inversion voicing of the chord when you play all the notes, right? If you could finger it that way and just not play the bottom string, now you're in root position. Or you could just finger it like this and be careful not to play the bottom string, okay? If you do play the bottom string, in in this particular case, it's okay. It'll still sound like a C chord, but it's what's called the first inversion. Okay, so let's look at those terms just to review this because it's important. All right, show, overlay. Oh, where did they go? Oh no, it's right. It's in Ecamm. Sorry, multiple pieces of software going at the same time, and I haven't done too many streams lately, so I have to remember how to do all this. All right, so root position. Okay, so when we play in root position, the tonic is the lowest note that we're sounding. Okay, so that goes for any chord. So if you play a C chord, there's the lowest C there. If you play an A minor chord, also on the 5th string, okay, that's the A is the root of the chord. So most of the time, that's what you want. You want the root position version of the chord. Now, when I say root position, as long as the tonic is the bottom string, it doesn't really matter what voicing you play above it. You still call it root position. So, for example, in the C chord, it just so happens that the notes are laid out in scale order. 1, 3, 5, 1, 3. Okay, it's all sequential. 1, 3, 5, 1, 3. You haven't skipped yet. There's no big gaps. You're not going 1, 5, 3 or anything like that. 1, 3, 5, 1, 3. They're all in order. Okay, so that's what's called a closed voicing. Okay, when you don't skip at all from say 1 to 5 or 3 to 1 or anything like that. You don't have any big gaps. You just got everything in scale order. Okay, that's a closed voicing. And this particular C, I'm playing root position, okay, with the tonic as the lowest note, and a closed voicing. So it's kind of ho-hum, you know. I mean, of course it works. It's correct. There's nothing wrong with it. It's just kind of ordinary, right? Ooh, getting all kinds of interesting effects because my camera's dirty. Yeah, so that's root position and closed voicing. Now, with this A minor chord, excuse me, A minor chord, this is also A minor in root position because we're playing the A on the bottom. But what happens above it in the voicing, it goes 1, 5. Already it's not in scale order, so it's an open voicing. Okay, so this was a closed voicing in C, because everything was in order, and this is a little out of order. It's not in scale order. So right away there's a 5th on the bottom, and then another 1. So we're going 1, 5, 1. So the power chordy, right? Then finally 3 is there. It's available on the 2nd string, and 5 again on the top string. And those numbers I'm throwing out, those are 1, 3, and 5 of A minor. Okay, A minor is A, C, E. So we've got 2 A's, we've got a C, and we've got 2 E's in the voicing. And the order that they get played in is 1, 5, 1, 3, 5. So the top 3 strings, 1, 3, 5, that's scale order. That's a closed voicing if you just play only 3 notes. But as soon as you play all 5 strings in the voicing, that's an open voicing, and it's in root position. But with A minor, you can also do this thing. You can alternate with its low 5. 1, 5, 1, 5. Because E is the 5 of A minor. Okay? A, C, E, A, C, E, 1, 3, 5. So E is on the bottom. In that case, I can play it occasionally. So let's skip ahead to 2nd inversion. Let's see now. Overlays. 2nd inversion. Boink. There we go. Okay. So 2nd inversion is where you have the 5th as the lowest note in the voicing. So an example with C major was this one. The low 5. With A minor, it would be the low E. Now, it's a less stable version of the voicing. So that's why most of the time we don't rely on 2nd inversion, because it's less rooted sounding than root position. Oh, careful, how you guys are making jokes. Ha ha ha. Okay, cool. So that's root position and second inversion. Obviously, I've left an inversion out. uh, Probably the most interesting sounding inversion a lot of the time is first inversion. Okay, so I've got them in sort of order here. So root position up here at the top of the screen, tonic is the lowest note. We talked about second inversion already with fifth as the lowest note. But we can also have the third as the lowest note. So if we're playing C, what's the third of C? E, right? So you could leave that bottom string open. And that's a first inversion. So now when would you want to use that? Well, you'd have to be very careful about how you use it. Because in general, first inversion chords, they sound quite unstable. But the reason why they sound unstable is because the root is not on the bottom. And what your ear is tending to hear it, you're hearing it kind of as a passing chord. You're hearing it as a way to get somewhere else. Okay? So if I do something like this, a lot of songs do that, right? So one, so that's the root position. And then we get first inversion, and then to the F chord. This is in root position, okay? So I played a root position C, I played a first inversion C, and then a root position F. Okay? So that's something you hear all the time. Here it is in D. Threw on the 5 chord there so that your ear would definitely make the change to the new key. So we get D in root position, D in first inversion, G in root position, A in root position, back to D. So I'll play that a little cleaner now. Okay. So the one special chord I threw in there was that first inversion, and the first inversion version of D. And then you could do something like this. You could even do like, you can maybe have a song that goes. See, the interesting thing there is all I did for the first long time there is play a D chord. But because at first I started alternating between the root and the low fifth. So I went from root position to second inversion, like this. Then I went to first inversion to go to the 4 chord, which is G. Okay, so I'm playing a very simple bass line for you so that I get your ear used to the movement that I'm doing. So root position, second inversion, root position, first inversion, root position of the 4 chord, root position of the 5 chord, back again, root position, second inversion, root, first inversion, so it's a really nice way to color up a chord progression, because if I just played D a bunch of times, that would work. It would be fine. There would be nothing wrong with that. Just to have a song that was like this. Okay, that's fine. Again, not incorrect, nothing wrong. But the other version where you throw in some bass movement is a little more interesting. I think, it depends on the song. If the song feels like it needs it, then it's a good thing to be able to do. And it's a good thing to know how to do. Okay. And then, so what you'll see very often in a lot of chord charts, you'll see something like this, what people tend to call slash chords, or you can also call them polychords. There's a bunch of different names for them. But essentially what you're doing is you're introducing the idea of playing a different bass note with a chord. So for example, this, okay, whoops, sorry. That was D first inversion. And then I can call this D over A, right? D and then a slash and then an A. You see that a lot in chord charts, right? So D, D over A, D, D over F sharp, G. Okay? So in a chord chart, you're more likely to see something like a chord over its 5 over its 3, like a D over A, for example, or a C over E. That would be the first inversion of C. But then you'll also see other things, and this is kind of interesting. There's a couple I talk about here, 5 over 4 and 2 over 1. So what does that mean? Well, the 2 should be not capitalized. Let me fix that. Because the 2 is minor, so we're supposed to use lowercase. There we go. We're supposed to use lowercase for chords that have a minor third in them. Okay, so in this case, 5 over 4 is one of them, and then another one is 2 over 1. So what does that mean? Okay, so if I'm playing in C, okay, actually it'd be easier to play in D. Let me just, if we're playing in D, okay, go back to my earlier little crummy little chord progression I came up with. Okay, so I could play 5, okay, which is A. My fingers are big, so I don't tend to play the A with 3 fingers. I just use one finger to play strings 2 and 3. So don't get confused by the fact that I'm only using 2 fingers to play A. Yeah. But then the other advantage of only using 2 fingers is I can reach over and do this. And that's an example of that first polychord there that you see, or the first slash chord, 5 over 4. So we have a song that does this. Oops, sorry. Kind of interesting. So I went 5 over 4, and then I went to 1 over 3, and that's called voice leading in the bass. So you can hear the bass is actually playing like a scale, a descending scale pattern, 5 4 3, and it uses that 4, that passing bass note, to create a kind of tension and a kind of direction for the bass line. What I'm really doing, and here's the one I've skipped over. Third inversion is something that you don't hear about as much, but it's completely possible, and it works the same way as the as the first and second inversions. Okay, so root position, you're just taking a triad usually and playing it, whatever. And then first inversion with the 3 on the bottom. Second inversion with 5 on the bottom. Now, if we get into chord extensions, the first chord extension after 1 3 5, 1 3 5, okay, is 7, the next odd number. Okay, so when we start building chord extensions, that's always the first one we think about, because it's the next third along, right? Because our chord system in Western music is all it's called tertian harmony. It's based on thirds, right? So the third harmony is really integral to Western harmony. It's the most important harmony, and it's kind of the harmony that everything else kind of depends on, right? So that's why when we start building chords, we start with note number 1, the root, then we add its third. Okay, so we go up a third, and then we go up another third to the 5th, and we go up another third to the 7th, and that's how we build chord extensions. So here's 1, here's 1 and 3, here's 1 and 3 and 5. Okay, so now if I went to 7 in this key, 1 2 3 4 5 6 7, it's B natural, so sounds like the beginning of Color My World by Chicago. Yeah, that's it. They're rhythmically arpeggiating a major 7th chord in that song. Okay. So that is the first chord extension. And what you can do is you can do something like, if you wanted to, you could think of this. When you do this kind of descending bass line, you hear it in so many songs, right? Sorry, I'll play that again. Very famous song by what's that guy's name? It'll come back to me eventually, the songwriter of that song. Yeah, so that bass line, what I do there for a split second, that C over B chord, okay, the second chord is the C. We call this C over B usually, because So when you hear it by itself in thin air, if you had no context, that's a pretty weird sound. If you started a song with that, you'd say, really? You want to start there? That's an odd place to start. But in context, as a chord between other chords, makes all kinds of sense, right? So that descending bass line sound, we've heard it a billion times. Bach used it all the time. And that's an example of this, a third inversion. So we've got C, E, G, and we've got B, and in this case, we're putting B on the bottom, okay? That's an example of a third inversion chord. Another example is the one like here, 5/4. So if I played the, I was playing D before, and I did something like this. That thing. Jerry Jeff Walker. Thank you, Gord. That's who wrote Mr. Bojangles. Yes, correct. Ding, ding, ding. Well done. So this chord, A over G, okay, in the key of D, that's the 5 chord with 4 in the bass now. So that is also, if you think about it, put your thinking cap on for a split second. A major is A, C sharp, E. That's the 1-3-5 of A major. Okay, its 7th extension. Okay, and in this case, it has to be in the key of D. So instead of being a major 7th, it'll be a lowered 7th. It'll be a minor 7th. So, okay, that would be the full A 7th chord. Or you could voice it like this. It's kind of nicer most of the time. Okay, but if you did it this way, that's A 7th. And what I'm doing is I'm taking this G and I'm lowering it down here. I'm putting it 2 octaves lower in this case. So this chord and this one use the same pitch classes. They are essentially the same chord, but they're voiced quite differently. And sometimes that's the big difference, is how you voice a chord. It can make all the difference in the world. So that's why this sounds related to this, but doesn't sound the same. It sounds quite different, actually. So throwing that 7 down in that lower octave, it allows you to do the, again, more voice leading in the bass like we did before. To get there, right? It really makes for a nice bass movement to get from 5 to 1 in a kind of non-standard way. But completely correct and completely in line with tertian harmony. So that's an example of a third inversion. So there are such things, okay? And then the other example I give you there, where I changed the case of the 2 chord. So in most keys, okay, like major keys, in all major keys, the 2 chord is minor, okay? So for example, in the key of C, the 2 chord it starts on D, and its third interval between D and F, that's a minor third, okay? So you would have D minor, and then over 1 is an example that I gave. Okay, you hear that quite often. And very often you hear it as kind of like a pedal chord. So what I mean by that is, what's a good example that's kind of more easily playable on the guitar? Yeah, okay, so if you hear this a lot, especially in the 70s, this was done a lot. Where you got like an E chord. So there, I'm playing an F sharp minor, okay, but I'm letting the E sound. So what I end up with is really an F sharp minor 7th chord, okay, because I got F sharp, and then I'm playing it over E, F sharp minor, but I'm playing it over E. Okay, so again, I'm taking that lowered 7th, and I'm playing it way down 2 octaves lower than you would normally find it, or an octave lower than you would normally find it. And I'm using it as the bass note in the chord. And then because of the way the guitar is set up, it's kind of charming to do this. Leave those top 2 strings ringing, okay? So if you think about a really good example, it's that song called Peaceful Easy Feeling by the Eagles. Eventually when the song starts, I think they go to an E, an A chord. I think that's what they do. But in the introduction, So that's an example of a 2/1 chord, is in the introduction to that song. Okay, and every second song in the 70s went. They just loved that progression. But again, you're pedaling on the E all the time. In this case, you're playing what sort of is a G sharp minor chord, this thing, but you're playing it over E. Whoops. And you're letting those top two strings ring all the time. So it sounds almost like an open tuning kind of idea, right? That kind of progression is really simple to do in an open tuning. Another one that you heard a lot back then was it's the exact same thing in A. It's even similar voicings. Or D. So in each of those cases, what I'm doing is I'm pedaling on the tonic, right? And when I play the 2 chord, which is a minor chord, let's say in the key of E, that 2 chord was F sharp minor, but I'm retaining that low E in the bass, so that's actually a third inversion of F sharp minor, or it's like this 2/1 chord that I mentioned here, okay? That's an example of the slash chord idea, but the slash chord idea is mostly like a shorthand way of writing. Like instead of me saying, play the third inversion of D minor, if you saw that, you might go, oh, I got to do math really quickly. Whereas if I called it D minor over C, yeah, that's a lot easier to understand. And especially if you played on the piano, you can really see the chords laid out so easily. And oh yeah, D minor is this triad, bing, and I keep the C going, no problem. You know, it's easy on a keyboard. All right. So let me know if you have questions about this. This concept of inversions, really important because we use them all the time, because the guitar is a harmonic instrument. It's a harmonic instrument and a melodic instrument and a rhythmic instrument and a percussive instrument all at once. It's a you can play bass lines. You know, I mean, it's an incredibly adept instrument, and knowing how to do voice leading in the bass as well as nice chord inversions at the same time, that really serves you well with your harmonic language. So if you have any questions, don't be afraid to ask. Okay. And then in terms of other topics about chords, yeah, getting really well acquainted with your chord extensions is really important. We've talked a bit about them in the past, but like C, C major 7th, adding the 7th to the chord, okay, and then adding the 9th. Okay, that's a really nice all-purpose major 9th position that we've talked about before. You can move that up and down the neck. There, it's a D major 9th. This particular voicing doesn't have the 5th in it. Okay, it says 1, 3, 7, 9, 3. When it's a C chord, that's the layout. I'm just leaving out 5. And remember, when you voice chords, the most important thing is the most important elements in a chord are the root, the 3rd, and the 7th. Okay, so if you get into chord extensions, the 7th is important to state, you know, pretty much at all times, except if you're intentionally leaving it out. Okay, so this particular case, we're playing major 9th chords, and I'm able to move up in whole tones here because it's, the high E works out really nicely. It's the 3rd of this chord, it's the 9th of this chord, it's the tonic of this chord, and when it's an E here at the 7th fret, I can actually play the low E as well. Beautiful sounding, great chord. I think I've talked about that. My tune, It's Fun Being Lucky, that's the first chord. Here it's an F major 9th, and in this case the high E is the major 7th, which is great. Here it's kind of cool. You get a G, and then it's a G major 9th, then adding the E makes it a major 13th chord, which is also really pretty. And if you play the bottom E, you end up with an E minor 11th chord. So pretty. Okay, that position one more time. Let's say if we played as an E chord. We've talked about this before, but I'll just review. I'm playing 5th string at the 7th fret with my 2nd finger. I'm using my index at the 4th string 6th fret. I'm using my pinky finger on the 3rd string 8th fret. I'm using my 3rd finger, my ring finger, on the 2nd string 7th fret, and I'm playing the 2 outside strings open when it's an E chord. Okay, and then as a D chord, just leave out the bottom string. As a C chord, leave out the bottom string. It even works if you do it B flat, you end up with a sharp 11, which is so cool. Anyway, it's a really great position. But here, yeah, here when I played it as a G chord, but then played the 2 outside E strings, E minor 11th. Beautiful. Here it's an A major 9th. And in this case, when I play the low E, I'm playing it as a 2nd inversion. Because E is the 5th of A. So cool. So cool. Yeah. So major 9th. Okay, a major 9th has the major that you say when you say the name of the chord has to do with the 7th. What kind of 7th it is. It's a major 7th. Okay, because you can play 9ths that have minor 7ths in them and they sound like this. Much jazzier sounding, much bluesier, like my arrangement of the Jaco Pastorius tune. Again, no nails, but the first chord in the original version is that exact voicing. It's the E 9th voicing. Okay, so when you just say 9th, it's understood that there's a 7th in there, and it's minor. That's why you don't say it. Okay, when you say major, it's understood that there's a 7th there and it's major. So when I say E major 9th, that's the chord 1, 3, 5, 7, the 7 you would normally find in the scale, 9. And then if it's E9, then it's 1, 3, 5, lowered 7th, 9th. Okay, great. So that's kind of all I should really talk about today in terms of chords. George wanted to talk a little bit about writer's block. And it's interesting because it's an experience I think that pretty much every writer of music or anything, writer of anything, writer of screenplays, writer of books, writer of poetry, writer of technical papers, hits. You know, it seems like you're not inspired, like there's just nothing going on. You have no fresh ideas. And we've all been there. Now, in my case, I wouldn't even really call it writer's block. I would call it something different. I would call it not having enough time to just sit and write music. And so life can get extremely busy. Like my life's been extremely busy, moving and rebuilding the studio and getting this place shipshape and trying to keep it clean and trying to keep up with my dishes and my laundry and all that kind of stuff. It's a lot of work moving into a new place and doing everything myself. So it's a time-consuming project, and I set time aside to do it. I didn't take any gigs for the month of May, and I just thought, no, I'm just going to be too busy. So I could work it all out, but I have no time to write music right now. The nice thing about having the studio almost set up is that, for example, the video game company that I write music for, I sent them a big heap of music just before I went on tour, and then I warned them. I said I'm not going to be around much in the next little while, so here's a big pile of music. And let me know if you want any of it reworked or whatever. And they said, yeah, we like this one tune a lot. Can you rework it? So I've been reorchestrating it and just a little bit on headphones on the road with my laptop. But now I can really get the final, the short strokes done here in the studio because I'm finally set up for, my stereo setup is all set up. And then my Atmos is 8/12 set up, so 2/3 set up. I just have to do the overheads. But I was listening to some Atmos music in 7.1 earlier, which was fun. It sounded great once I had all the speakers set up, just before we went live. Yeah, so my point is, yes, the writer's block thing. Yeah, I find it's just mostly for me, it's a lack of time that I most of the time I find myself really inspired to write music almost all the time whenever I have the time to do it. And because I'm actually hired as a composer, I have to find time to do it as part of my living on a regular basis, so that the oil is always there in the works. Like I'm always able to write something that'll sound pretty cool. As far as solo guitar music, um, because life is busy, that sometimes falls onto the back burner a little bit. Um, and it's a shame because it's what people know me for the most. But at the same time, it's sometimes just hard to make the time to do it. Now, in terms of actual writer's block, I probably would say that I have experienced it, just not much. Um, the, for me, the luxury I always had early on was that I always had this record deal that was tied to a publishing deal, and the publishing deal was always, I had to write a certain number of tunes every year, and oh, thanks, yeah, Jenny, I'm glad you enjoyed that. What we've done so far, you're welcome. Um, so yeah, it was like if I wanted to get paid, I had to write a certain number of tunes, and it was a very prolific time as a result. I did, I guess, 9 records for record companies that were tied to publishing deals. So yeah, every year I needed to have at least 10 or 12 really good new tunes, and if I didn't, then it was trouble. um, I've found that since I've been more independent, like working with Candy Rat and sort of supplying them with an album whenever one was ready, or now that I'm just not affiliated with any label at all, it's easy to tell myself that, oh, well, I'll get the stuff written. I'll put a record out sometime. Um, and I'm too busy touring and doing everything else that actually generates most of my income. That sometimes that the compositional side can fall by the wayside. I had a chat about writer's block with Bruce Coburn many years ago. Um, Now Bruce has been an incredibly prolific songwriter. If you followed his career, and I've brought him up a lot because he's a real mentor, really, in a lot of ways. Even just a really great example of a really great musician and a really great composer and songwriter and guitar player. Um, but in the early part of his career, he was putting out an album every year, whole new album. Crazy, that's hard to do. Now, back in the days when everything came out on vinyl records were only, max 40 minutes long. So there wasn't as much pressure to produce large amounts of long tunes or whatever, or just when I started my recording career, the CD had already taken over, and you could cram 70 minutes of music onto a CD, and so there was a certain amount of pressure being put on you. My first album, I recorded 13 tunes, thinking I would only pick the best 10, but everybody was like, "Oh, they're all so good! And you can fit 70 minutes on a CD." So the first album is 66 minutes long. I had to leave tunes off the vinyl version because the vinyl just couldn't be made long enough. They would have had to make a double album. So yeah, 4 tunes got left off. It's a shame. But anyway, by then most people were buying CDs anyway, or cassettes. A lot of people were buying cassettes. So you could make an album almost as long as you wanted to. On a cassette, there's almost no limit. You can make like a 2-hour album, but then you have to listen to it on a horrible cassette. But CD, yeah, 70 minutes. So that was a lot of pressure to write a lot of music. And so I did my first record, and then they asked for my second record, and I had no new music. So I was just like, oh, I gotta get busy. So I wrote as much music as quickly as I could. And some of the tunes are really good. Like some really great tunes came out of that experience. Like Wall of Glass is on my second album. And that's a great piece of music, if I do say so myself. And there's other great tunes on there as well. But yeah, lately since I don't have that pressure, I sometimes take longer between records. But then I feel like now I can make more ambitious records. Like the last album, which came out a year ago yesterday, the Water album. That's an ambitious record. It's full orchestra on there. There's string quintet and a couple of tunes. There's even a string quintet tune that I recorded that didn't make it onto the album. Crazy. And yeah, collaborations with Bruce and Brooke and Michael and Sean and all kinds of people. So, you know, it's like the making of the recording and the production of the recording now is what I spend so much time on. The writing of the music, the music gets written. Like some of the tunes off the latest album, I had snippets of them, recorded in various places, and I thought, got to turn that into a full-length tune. Got to do it now. So, like that tune "Sea Bright," that's the very, very first tune on the record. It was originally like a 1-minute demo, and then I thought I got to develop that into a complete piece. And so I wrote a whole second section. It's in a different key. It's kind of cool. And it's a real showpiece. It turns into a really lovely tune that people like a lot off the new record. So I can kind of write on demand most of the time. But anyway, Bruce, he was putting out an album a year, and that was from like 1970 until about 1990. So his first 20 records he did in 20 years. Then he told me, he said he went through significant writer's block. Now, I don't know what was going on in his life at the time. He's put out a biography, so you could probably look it up, see what, but I know that, his marriage didn't last, his marriage ended around 1980, but this is like 10 years later, so I don't know if there was another change of life or, like he had to move or whatever it was, but he went through a significant writer's block, and he was really worried. He thought, maybe I'll never write another song. And that must be a terrible feeling. I honestly have never had that feeling. But he just thought, there are no more songs. I have nothing left. Nothing's coming to me. So now, the difference, I think, for me, because I rely mostly on instrumental music, that's mostly what I write, even if I don't feel terribly inspired to write something, if I tell myself, Don, you really need to write a piece of music, get on with it here, then very often what I can do is I can rely on a few tricks that I learned when I did my undergrad degree. And when I did my music degree back in the 14th century, my profs in the composition courses were often saying, well, look, if you're having trouble thinking of what you want to write, come up with parameters. Just come up with a set of rules. Say to yourself, okay, for example, if I'm writing a guitar tune these days, I was writing very academic music back then, very experimental music. My music is still pretty experimental at times, but much more mainstream. And so what I would tell myself now is, well, do I want to write in a major key or a minor key? Do I want to write something happy sounding, something kind of glum sounding, something pensive, something really funky and rocky and fun? Get people grooving in their seats. Like, what do I want? Which of those categories can I choose from? So I think to myself, okay, maybe a minor tune, minor key, but funky. I've written a few of those, right? Like Dracula and Friends, both of them are in minor keys and they're really funky. Michael, C minor, but really funky. So those are some examples. So yeah. And then I say to myself, okay, well, a funky tune. All right, probably the best kind of, then I'll come up with a parameter for the rhythm. And the rhythm parameter might be swing 16th rhythm. That's a swing 16th, so it's a really fast triplet. And you're feeling the 1 and 3 of each triplet. So like Michael, Dracula and Friends, they rely on the swing 16th rhythm. Okay, it's it's really popular in hip hop too. All right, really funky automatically. Okay, minor key, swing 16th rhythm, and then I start. Okay, how about a bass line? So come up with a really interesting bass line. So Dracula and Friends, boom, really kind of classic sounding, like filthy, super funky groove, right? Okay, so that could be the bass line. And then in that context, very often what I tell myself is, okay, another parameter I can rely on is question and answer or negative patterns. Okay, so question and answer is one of the most popular ways of writing a piece of music. When you're writing, even like in the tune that I started the video from, the tune that I started the show with today, that Yula and I played. Listen to the themes. Da 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 dum, da 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 dum, da 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 dum. So it's kind of like da 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 dum. That's the question. Da 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 dum is the answer. So they're thematically linked. Okay, it's the same kind of rhythm, very similar move in the melody, but in two different tone centers, and so that creates a question and answer. So that's another parameter you can use. And when I talk about negative patterns with Dracula, I'm not in the right. Oh, I can get into the right tuning pretty quickly. So Dracula and Friends Part 1, originally I recorded it a whole tone lower than this, in a C-based tuning. But for playing live, it's just easier to play it in D because it's so close to standard tuning. You just have to tweak 2 notes. But I started off with... Okay, so something like that. And then a really cool trick is that then that gets implanted in your brain. Then you kind of fool the listener a little bit by... Okay, so when I say you fool the listener, because you've heard the whole bass line in the introduction a couple of times, when I start throwing in those negative patterns, your brain kind of fills in the bass line. So you think that you're still hearing the same bass line, and you're not. There are notes missing. And the notes that I'm missing, I'm filling in with this kind of Miles Davis kind of horn line thing, okay? So that was written really quickly because I told myself, okay, yeah, minor, swing 16th, come up with a cool bass line, start filling in the cracks with horn lines. And the tune really got written quickly. And then I wrote a part 2 on the baritone in a much wilder tuning, in a much lower key. But they're structured, the structures of each piece are almost identical. They're just different melodies, but so they bookend each other really nicely. And again, that was another parameter. Oh, I've written it once. Now I'll write a different version, basically, of the same piece with different musical information in it, but that follows the same form and that has the same basic feel. I see a question from Kerstin. Do you find it easier to write an orchestral piece compared to a solo guitar tune? No. No, solo guitar tunes are things that I've been writing for a long time. So, if you told me, write a solo guitar album in the next 2 weeks, I could do it. And some of the tunes might be really good. Some of them might sound like I had to write them quickly. But if you just said, here's $50,000, write an album in 2 weeks, and that'll be your year's wages for writing the album, I could do it, no problem. An orchestral thing, that would take much more work. Anything orchestral is incredible. It's a big slog. It's very rewarding when you hear the end result, but it's a bit like building a house, as opposed to, for me, writing a solo guitar tune is a bit like making a nice meal. You can make a nice meal in a couple of hours and everybody will be happy. Building a house takes quite a bit longer, and there's so many steps along the way. So with orchestral music, there's just so many things to know. And then to top it off now, it's great that we live in this era where we can hear our orchestration in real time as we go along with a computer, because you used to have to hope and guess and pray that your orchestration will sound good when real players played it. And like, for example, back when I was doing my undergrad at York, I had to write, for one of my composition courses, I had to write my major piece, and I wrote it for a string quintet and a percussion ensemble playing together. And I had really no idea what it was going to sound like until finally some players played it. And unfortunately, they didn't play it well, so it didn't sound like what I was expecting it. But I think if it had been played by better players, I would have been pretty satisfied with it. But again, I had no way of knowing how it would sound. But whereas now I can whip something up on the computer, and I can do it from a score, or I can just write on the keyboard directly into the computer, and I can get an idea in real time. Oh yeah, those French horns and the oboes and the strings. Wow, they ever sound great when they play those parts together, and that'll be the case in real life too. Waiting for part 3. Yeah, so I have to write a part 3. You don't have $50,000, unfortunately. We'd love to challenge you now. Okay, well, challenge accepted. It might take me more than 2 weeks, especially if you're not going to pay me $50,000. But you've been very supportive over the years, Castine. So I owe you something at this point. I'll write a few tunes and dedicate them to you. How's that? All right. Well, great. That was a fun hour. I hope you got some good information out of it. The writer's block thing, really, it's mostly a matter of, I think, in my case, coming up with parameters. With instrumental music, that's one thing. I know if you're a songwriter, it's maybe more difficult because there's this other level of lyric writing. Again, the last thing I'll say about the whole thing is, I don't write lyrics very often. Very rarely have I ever written sets of lyrics. If I have, they tend to be not easily decipherable. I'm a really private person. Even though I do have this very public job, like you guys watching this are among the few people who know about what's been going on in my life the last few weeks, last few months. I haven't gone very public about it at all. I kind of keep my cards close to my chest most of the time about my personal life. So as a result, I think that's one of the reasons why I'm shy about writing lyrics. Because, I could write a set of lyrics about something that's happening in my life. But then sometimes I think, God, I don't want to bare my soul to strangers. I'm not interested. When other people write songs that are about topics that I find relevant, I can enjoy that. But very often, I find that the lyrics are so secondary for me. If the person has a beautiful voice or a compelling voice or an interesting voice, I'll listen to them sing. Don't get me wrong. It's not like I have any snobbery about vocal music. I love vocal music. I listen to vocal music all the time. I record the occasional vocal tune. But lyrics to me are almost not important. That sounds really pathetic, I know. It's one of the reasons why, like, for example, a lot of people really are into Bob Dylan, or they're really into Leonard Cohen, or something like that. And I can't get past the way they sing. I hear Bob Dylan sing, I hear Leonard Cohen sing. I can't deal with it. I don't like the sound of it. So I stop listening, right? And they may have written a great song, but I'd rather hear somebody else sing it, Like, Bob Dylan has written some great songs. Absolutely. I will attest to that. And very often when I hear them covered by other people, I go, wow, that's such a great song. When I hear him do them, I go, I probably wouldn't have listened to it twice, So for me, it's like the lyrics are a lot less important than the music and the sound of the music. And if you get me with the sound, then I'll listen to the lyrics. David Byrne talks about the same kind of the guy from Talking Heads. He says when he writes songs, he just has dummy lyrics that he uses, and then he eventually comes up with something that sort of makes sense. He has an album called Stop Making Sense, so maybe he's not too worried about it. But he always says it's the sound of the music that gets him. If the lyrics are kind of cool and they work, like "You May Ask Yourself," blah blah blah, that song, "Once in a Lifetime." Fun lyrics, but they did not come first. The music came first. Jenny, what score do I use? MuseScore, etc. Very good info. Thanks very much for your time. Jenny, I use a bunch of different ones. I've never really used MuseScore, but I have it on my computer, mostly because I have one student who's really interested in transcribing, and that's the score program that he uses. And it works not unlike most of the other ones. And of course, it has the advantage of being open source and free. So that's nice. But for school, I had to learn how to use Sibelius for my master's degree. I didn't use it before that. I find it not very intuitive, and it's kind of hard to use, but it does a really nice job. Like, the scores look amazing. MuseScore puts out a nice looking score too. And I've been using Finale for the longest time. I started using it in the 90s. And again, I find it the easiest of the notation programs to use, probably because I've been using it the longest, even though now I don't use it very often. I use, for doing guitar music, I mostly use Guitar Pro, because it's really improved. It used to be terrible. Well, I mean, mostly the output was terrible. Like the scores looked bad, whereas now they look like engraved scores. They've really upped their game that way. And Guitar Pro has the advantage also being very cheap. It's only like $60 US, but it only does one thing. It does guitar music and nothing else. But the newest version is really cool. You can import sound files, and so you can be playing a wave or an MP3 along with your score and check your work that way. You know, it's all integrated, which is really cool. Also with Guitar Pro, you can output a MIDI version of the tune, and so you can send the score to other people who have the program, and they can have it being played on their computer, a MIDI version, and they can learn to play along with it that way. All those things are cool. But yeah, it just does the one thing really well. Finale and Sibelius and Dorico, it's one of the new ones, and MuseScore, they're much more like a highfalutin. You can do any score with those. You can score for full orchestra, or all the way down to solo flute. All right, thanks you guys. Enjoy. Watch this a bunch of times if you need to understand the chord side of things better. Okay, I went through it relatively quickly, but some of it was a review. I know there's a few people here for the first time, so it may be new to you. But also, I cover some of it in the DRGA lessons. Alrighty, talk soon. See you next week. Okay, be well.